Good morning. Dear members of government, dear members of parliament, dear friends and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we must acknowledge it. There are many issues with human rights, far more than what the previous generations of Christian Democrats believed. Most of these issues have a theoretical root, but today I want to denounce a very practical one. Nowadays, the main purpose of human rights is not to protect the freedom to live a decent life anymore, but to serve as an instrument to impose the leftist revolution on countries which refuse it. Sadly, it became an instrument of ideological domination rather than protection on countries such as Hungary and Poland, as well as on many other countries in the south. And why is that so? What happened? One of the reasons, we must say, is corruption. Not only corruption of the concepts, but corruption of the human rights system by radical left activists who infiltrated the institutions and by global private actors such as the Gates, Soros, and Ford foundations. This is what the European Centre for Law and Justice has revealed in its recent reports. Let's get into details. A few private foundations and companies are exercising an increasing control over international institutions. For example, in 2020, they have paid nearly $1.5 billion to UNICEF, over $1 billion to the World Health Organization, $500 million to the Office of the High Commissioner for Refugees, and so on. Even the International Criminal Court received fundings from the Open Society, as well as the Council of Europe in Strasbourg with the European Court of Human Rights and the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. Along with these fundings, these private foundations contribute to set the agenda of these international institutions they finance. There is a reason for that. The international institutions have global power, but seek money. Rather, large foundations have money, but seek global power. Now, I will share you this corruption, how it works in a few examples. At the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, we revealed that over the last 10 years, at least 22 out of the 100 judges were former staff of 7 leftist foundations, which are also active before this same court as applicants or third parties, such as the Open Society, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, or the International Commission of Jurists. Among these 22 activist judges, 12 are former staff or even board members of the Open Society. 12 judges out of 22. Moreover, the 6 other NGOs are also funded by the Open Society, which means that 22 out of 100 judges come from NGOs, which are even the Open Society or funded by the Open Society. And they were employees or board members of those organizations. This demonstrates the grip of those foundations, especially the Open Society, over the Court of Strasbourg. But there is more. At least 88 times in those 10 years, those judges have ruled on cases introduced or supported by their own former foundation or NGO, acting both as judge and party in those cases. 88 times. A judge ruled on a case introduced by his former organization. Okay, a board member of the Open Society, or former board member, became judge and then ruled on a case supported or financed by the Open Society. 88 times in 10 years, at least. You can find all the details and much more on our report, the NGOs and the judges of the ECHR. As a result of our report, we got a lot of attacks, of course. But the ECHR eventually changed its ethical rules. And for the first time, a board member of the Open Society failed to be appointed as a judge in Strasbourg. Thank you. The situation is not better at the UN, as we have shown in another report published last year on the financing of the UN Special Rapporteurs. We revealed that a large proportion of the Special Rapporteurs of the United Nations are also former executives of those radical foundations and NGOs, and moreover, that those Special Rapporteurs have accepted millions of dollars from these foundations, especially from the Ford and the Open Society foundations, out of any control from the states and the UN, and in violation of the ethical rules of the UN. The UN Special Rapporteurs are supposed to be independent experts with a worldwide competence on specific issues. They are at the top of the human rights machinery and have a considerable influence on human rights soft law. We explored every available financial record and interviewed 27 special rapporteurs. Some of them describe the situation as, I quote, corruption. In our report, we show in detail how the foundation pay and influence the agenda of the UN experts. But to be complete, we must also say that some states don't behave better than those foundations. I'll give you an example. The Open Society Foundation has given $100,000 in 2017 to a radical feminist group in New Jersey with the explicit purpose, I quote, to influencing a UN special rapporteur for him to write a specific report. And so he did. The following year, Mrs. Fionnuala Aulain, the head of the Open Society Women's Program, who gave the money, became herself a special rapporteur. Meanwhile, the lobbying director of the feminist group that received the money also became a UN expert. Today, Mrs. Dupretti, the lobbying director of this radical group, is the chair of the UN Working Group on Women's Rights. But in the meantime, she still is the director of international lobbying of a feminist group, which purpose is to influence the UN. Both sides, once again, conflict of interest. The problem is not only financial corruption, it's also intellectual corruption. Another example is the current UN Special Rapporteur on the right to health, Mrs. Mofokeng. As a medical doctor, she has herself performed abortions that she promotes. She presents abortion publicly as, I quote, a radical act of self-love. She is the UN Special Rapporteur on Health. This is ugly. In addition to promoting abortion, she also advocates for the legalization of prostitution, which she describes as the ultimate form of feminism. She teaches the countries. It's her role. This is not just stupid, it's evil. Because such persons are ruining the human rights system. It's a disgrace. You can find the details on this report on our website. The report is entitled The Financing of the UN Experts. Of course, they were not happy with it. We are expecting some more developments in the coming months from some internal administration from the UN. But the World Health Organization is even worse. You may have heard of the recent guidelines on abortion. And guess what? When we checked its authors and its financing, once again, we found the same radical groups. Those guidelines on abortion have mainly been drafted by the abortion lobby. The World Health Organization guidelines has been written mainly by the IPPF, the Center for Reproductive Rights, and the Population Council. And unsurprisingly, those guidelines recommend to legalize abortion on demand up till birth, and to weaken the right of the parents and the freedom of conscience of the medical practitioners. Those guidelines are published as an official WHO document, yet they have not been approved by any state, but only by a committee of so-called independent experts that is full of activists. And guess what? The process of drafting of those guidelines has largely been financed by Warren Buffett Foundation, which gave millions of dollars to the department of the WHO that published those guidelines. This is not surprising when you know that the director of the WHO department was previously the director on abortion matters at the Population Council in New York, an organization, a private organization, which purpose is to promote eugenics and population control around the globe. So this is just a glimpse on how the human rights system is today corrupted. The human rights system has been captured by the radical and global left. It became their instrument of domination. We must denounce it and break free from it. We shall not accept to submit to those ideologists. They are abusing their mandate and human rights. We, fellow conservatives, are the only ones who can save human rights from self-destruction. Because we accept that God exists and that He has established a natural law within us and above us that is truly universal and good. So please, join us in this fight for justice. Thank you.